Okay, so this week I'm assigning your first project in Photoshop. That's project 3. So what you want to do when you log into our course on Canvas is go to Files and check out what I'm giving you for the folder of the week. So you look for project 3. So I'm going to skip over this column, move all the way to the far column, and let's see what's in project 3. Well, let me click on it first to check what's in it. Okay, there's some handouts here for you. I'm going to go back and click on files again to get to the top level, and then I'm just going to hover over project 3 folder in the far column here, and then click on the ... and then click download. So you want to do that first so that you have the whole package there. And you can also go to assignments and visit project 3 assignment. And today exercise 5 is due, so hope everyone had a good time with that. Any questions about exercise 5? We're good on that. So we're going to be learning more skills like what you learned for making selections and separate layers in exercise 5, but you're going to learn even more advanced skills in how to refine your selections for this week. And next week you're going to learn about how to make really detailed selections easily next week. So if you have something that you want to cut out that's very detailed, you might want to wait to hold off on the painstaking labor until next week, because you'll have 2 weeks to turn this in. So I clicked on the assignment for project 3, and there you can download file PDF handouts from the project 3 assignment individually here. And then, of course, when you come to turn in your assignment, you click on Start Assignment. But here's the due date. You have 2 weeks. So I'm going to go into my Finder and Downloads and get my course folder here, which is a zip file at this point. I'm going to just double click on it to expand the project 3 folder there. I'm going to make a new Finder window and I'm going to my folder for the class to add the project 3 folder to my collection of folders for this class. So Tuesday, Thursday class, and I'm just going to drag in the project 3 folder. So there it is. So let me go ahead and start with opening up the assignment instructions for this assignment. It's the PS Project 3 assignment handout that's on top of the PDFs. There's also a folder full of fun-filled images called Bending Reality that are intended just to get your creative gears turning for what might be done, what type of image you might create for this project. I'm going to open some of those up. I'm going to just open this assignment up for now. So I call this the Superimposition context shift. And I probably mentioned to you before that for this assignment, the main goal is to choose an image of a background or a place, an environment. Choose an image of an environment, and then choose an image of a subject, And the idea is to seamlessly superimpose the subject into the new environment to make it look believable, as if that subject is really there in that place, interacting in that new world. And the original meaning of those, if you're using just two images, the original meaning of the two images should change as they come together to form the new composite image, or whatever you can go you can use as many images as you like. And as you piece them together, you're telling a different story, creating new meaning with how you combine those images. So this is your chance to bend the reality that a photograph is assumed to capture. So the images that you should be working with should be purely photographic images. They shouldn't be digital art or computer generated imagery that you might find from a scene in a sci-fi movie. They should not be images that are photographs of paintings or of other people's art. They should be images that are just captured with the snap of a camera, and then you're using Photoshop to cut out parts of those images and piece them together to create a new image. Just very similar to what you were doing in exercise 5, where you were cutting things out in photographs and combining them to make a new image. So you will be working with photographic images that can be scanned, downloaded, or shot with a camera, to make selections to superimpose a subject into a new context that is unexpected or unusual for that subject to be placed. That might be one way to approach the assignment, is to think of an unusual combination that tells a different story. Think about how shifting a subject out of its original context into another changes the meaning and enables you to create new meaning. Think about who your audience is and how your image could communicate an idea or evoke a reaction. So you choose an environment image, and there are some suggestions here. It's really important for this that your environment image be large enough to fill the space of an 8.5 by 11 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in a reasonable way. It doesn't have to completely fill the space of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, but it should not end up looking like a postage stamp in the middle. If you were to print this on paper, it shouldn't look like a tiny little image in the middle of the page. And I'll be talking about how to test this so that your image is high enough resolution so that you don't have to scale it up and lose resolution, and so that it's large enough to be reasonable. And the resolution of this image, it should be at least 220 pixels per inch. I'd like you to be creating this as a work that could potentially be printed. In the in-person class, we actually print these, but because this is the online version of the class, you're not going to be printing anything. But I'd like it to be the quality of a print, a work that could be printed and look good on print. So that's why it's important to follow these resolution guidelines for printing. The rule of thumb is for your resolution to be at 300 pixels per inch for printing, but you can still get away with a little bit lower, no lower than 220 pixels per inch, okay, for printing. Then you find a subject, There's some suggestions on the type of image you could look for a subject here. It could be a famous person, could be your pet hamster, a character that you incorporate into your environment. And then you incorporate that subject seamlessly. And there I'm going to be talking about methods of incorporating your subject seamlessly. Different ways to make it look like your subject's interacting. Maybe you use a drop shadow or a reflection. Maybe part of the scene in the environment is superimposed in front of the subject. We'll look at all of that when I show examples. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go into some files that I brought to show you some examples. And we can also look at the bending reality. So bending reality, these are a bunch of images that were circulated on the internet that are probably just tricks done by taking a camera and angling it and positioning it just at the right place at the right time. A lot of these. So it's interesting to see what you can do with just the camera. You have the advantage because you get to use the tricks and techniques available in Photoshop to do what these people did with just, angling their camera at just the right moment. But it's interesting to look at these because some of these images are kind of along the same lines as the assignment. So this is just kind of a play on imagery here. This person is finding a record where it's a hand taking a record out of a stack of records, and he's positioning his hand just right to look like he's going inside of that image there and interacting with it that way. This one, what do we have here? It's a certain place where there's a statue pointing, but when it looked like maybe there was a basketball game going on at the same time, and the camera was just angled just right to tell a new story, right? Instead of it just being a statue pointing and a basketball game going, now what does it look like? Looks like the statue is shooting hoops, right? So this could have been done with Photoshop, just finding a basketball and putting it there in front of a statue that was pointing. Or it could have been done by positioning your camera at just the right place at just the right time, right? A lot of people do these tricks with their cameras, like the sun is setting and this guy stands like positioning like he's dribbling the sun. Which that could have been done in Photoshop, or it could have been a camera positioning trick. And this is a fountain, right? Woman puts her soda can right in front of the fountain and the camera's just at the perfect angle to look like it's not a fountain, it's water shooting out of the soda. So this flower happened to be there in the room where there was this dancer dancing. Something like this could be done in Photoshop, where you cut out the petals of a flower and create an outfit with it on a person. Doesn't have to be done as a camera trick like this. There is a face-off here between ant and helicopter. That's a nice juxtaposition where it's really playing with the scale relationship in a funny way. And just imagine catching if this were just happened to be arranged this way with the, macro lens on the ant, and there's a helicopter in the distance. That could be done probably easier with less planning in Photoshop. So this is what tourists do all the time, right? The Leaning Tower. Then somebody stands in just the right place to look like they're the ones pushing on the tower to make it lean. And when I showed my students these images, one of my students later sent me this image, which is at the site of the Leaning Tower, taken from a completely different angle than what all of these other individuals are getting their photo taken at. So it's revealing the behind the scenes of the Leaning Tower tourist trick. There's another.
That's funny.
Yeah, there's another one of these where people are playing with images in magazines. The real meets the magazine. So there was a statue that was eavesdropping, and a guy stood there on his phone, and now it's telling a new story. She might have been listening to the echoes in the caves or on the pond or whatever, the whispers of the wind, and now she's listening to this cell phone conversation. And this person is lifting a cliff. Kissing the Sphinx. So it's a subject interacting with her background environment to tell a new story. Ouch, that doesn't look comfortable. So that's something that can be done for this assignment, where you take a close-up picture of your hand and act out a scene, kind of painful looking scene here. So this could be something done in Photoshop, cutting out one part of an image and superimposing it into another, or this could have been done by a close-up shot of a hand positioned in such a way in front of a woman who's acting this out and just angling it just right. Can tell a story. And this guy's just happens to be holding his fork with his whatever that is, his cherry tomato on his nose. So he kind of looks like he's Rudolph the red-nosed person sticking a fork in his nose. All right, so hopefully those images, they're just there to inspire you to think about how you can change the context by combining separate sources of imagery together to make a new image. Okay, I've got some examples of student work as well. So let me go to my OCC Project 3. Okay, so here's an example of some student work done for this project in Photoshop. So this person started with, let me turn off all these layers so you can see what he started with. So he started with this straightforward horse race, but he wanted to make this into the camel and ostrich horse race. So he put this sign in there. He added a camel, and in order to make it look more believable that this guy on a camel was really there, he took part of the background, because remember the background was this. He selected out part of the background. He used my favorite keyboard shortcut. What, you guys remember my favorite keyboard shortcut? No, no one remembers. So when you select something from the background image, I'm just using the quick select, and then you press Command J, which is the same as going, it's the same as copy and paste. It's also the same as going layer, new, layer via copy. Command J on a Mac, it would be Control J on Windows. So when you use that shortcut, Command J, it turns whatever you had in the marching ant selection into a separate layer. So it made this layer 1. That was what I selected. And then, so then we put the camel in there, or the sign, the camel, and then layer 1 can be dragged above the camel, like that. So now that's a way of seamlessly weaving the subject, the new subject, which is the guy on the camel, into this scene to make it more believable, because something from the background is now in front of what we superimposed. So it's not just slapping down your superimposition on top of the environment, it's weaving that, your subject, into the environment. Does that make sense? How that happened there? I'm gonna throw my layer away, because that's exactly what this student did, and he very nicely labeled all his layers. So he called that new layer that he created horse. So that's his layer, horse. And then ostrich, he got the guy on the ostrich there. He put a sign in there to make it more believable. There's camels here, and he took the horse heads here. I think it's these. Yeah, the horse heads needed to be made in front of the camel sign to make it look more believable that the camel sign is really there, kind of in the background. The rail post then is also in front, taken from the background, put in front of the camel sign. The rail as well, so that it looks like the camel sign is more in the background now. And the front horse is now appearing in front of the guy on the ostrich. So I turn that on. So that's a way to seamlessly weave your subject into the environment. Any questions about that? So that's an example that tells a new story. Okay, let's see another one. So here, we started with a calm underwater scene like this. And then he might have added a fish to make it a bigger fish to make it more interesting. A turtle, sea turtle up there, that's nice. That makes it more exciting. Scuba diver, how nice. That's nice. And then dun 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 dun, the plot thickens. He adds the shark. So he's really telling a whole new story from in combining all of this separate imagery together. One thing that you should aim for is for all your layers to have a consistent matching look. So you want to make sure that the levels kind of look the same. The color is kind of similar, so it doesn't look obvious that one image is taken from another place. So he did a really good job here, but I might just suggest adjusting the levels on the scuba diver to make him pop. He looks a little bit washed out compared to other imagery like the turtle. So I might highlight the scuba diver layer and then go into image adjustments and then adjust the levels to make it, bring it out a little bit, make it pop. So that was before, it's kind of washed out and not enough contrast, and then after it just makes it pop a little more. And then okay. Alright, I'm gonna not save that. And then this one, very interesting, clever work here. This one used drawing, which is fine if you use, if you want to incorporate drawing into this project, you're welcome to, as long as it's your own original drawing. And in this case, she used the drawing tools in Photoshop, which is great. You can definitely use the paintbrush or any of the drawing tools in Photoshop to really enhance the imagery and help facilitate the new image, or I guess the feeling that you want to convey with your image. In this case, she kind of created this mystical image. I'm going to turn off all of her layers. She could have labeled her layers to make it more, make it easier to, and a better, more organized workflow. But she did a fine job. So this is her background space. And then she added the girl. The girl looks like she's taking a bath or something. Bubbles that came with the girl. And then she added, what did she add? She did a little drawing in her hair to embellish her hair a little bit. You can always use drawing tools to embellish photography or touch it up in different ways. Then she added a bubble, a big bubble in her hand, made it interesting. And then fish inside the bubble, that's awesome. And then she added an additional glow inside the bubble. And what else? Oh, a cool, interesting drawing on her face to really make this into a mythic character, mythical being. More to the drawing, and a little bit more on the drawing on her eyes. Very cool, magical image. So do you guys want to see how you might add glow to this image? How she did the glow on the fish on the bubble. So she's got these two layers here. Let's see. There's this layer. Wait, where's the bubble here? This is one, and that's the fish. So she has, I guess she's got kind of two separate layers of bubble. This bubble and this bubble. I'm going to try loading. You can always load marching ants around a layer. So if I command click this, you'll see what the marching ants show up around the pixels that are actually opaque. So it looks like there's a hole in the middle there. And then I'm going to hit Command D to deselect. And then the other part of the bubble is this one. And then I can load the selection by holding Command and Command clicking the thumbnail. That loads the selection. Okay, so a technique to drawing on a layer and to stay within the lines is to command click the thumbnail of that layer like I just did, and then you have these marching ants that allow you to draw within the lines. And if you do this technique, I would recommend that you load the marching ants, and I would not draw directly on the layer that you loaded the marching ants. I would draw on a separate layer. So I'll make a new layer by clicking on the plus at the bottom of the layers panel, the plus button, and I'll just rename this. I'm going to call this glow. So if I wanted to paint on this glow layer so that I'm going to put it above the bubble, I would have the glow layer highlighted. The glow layer has nothing on it right now, and the marching ants are going to be there to prevent me from drawing outside of the lines on accident, because as much as I'd like to think I'm an awesome painter, artist, I'm not going to have a steady enough hand to draw exactly without the marching ants. So they're gonna really come in handy. So I'm going to take my paintbrush tool, choose a color, maybe like a really light color, maybe a light kind of goldish color, that. And I want to choose the hardness level of my brush. I want to bring it down to 0 hardness, and I can increase my brush size. I like to use the bracket keys to increase my brush size. And then I might bring down the opacity as well, so that I don't paint at full opacity. And then I kind of just paint along the edges, and that is just letting me enhance. And I'm painting on this glow layer. And being on a separate layer is nice, because then if I did too much, I could always erase. And I have, with my eraser, I'm going to bring down my hardness to 0 as well. And I can erase completely, or I can bring down the opacity on my eraser as well, and just kind of erase a little bit here and there. Just erase a little bit and paint on a little bit more. Erase a little, and then let me just hit Command D to deselect. Now I've added my own glow, so I can turn off the glow, and you can see without the glow, with the glow. So that's a way to paint within the lines, to load the marching ants on a layer, and then you can paint something to enhance your photograph in some way. Okay, another way that you could work is you could add an effect. So I could have this bubble layer highlighted here, and I can use there's an FX button at the bottom of your layer panel, and I can click it, and I can choose one of the effects, like an inner glow or an outer glow. There's an outer glow somewhere. There are a bunch of effects here. I'm going to go into more detail on these later, but if you want to start experimenting with these are layer styles or effects. So if I click inner glow, that's just another way to do what I did with painting. And so inner glow is turned on, and I could turn on any of the other effects in the list of styles here, and I can increase the opacity, and I can choose a different blending mode so the color blends with the bubble in a different way, like maybe instead of lighten screen, I can increase the choke and the size. Let's see, but I'm gonna uncheck preview. That's before, and that's with the effect. Maybe I'll change the color to brighten it up a little bit. So preview without the glow and with the glow. So that's another way to do it. And now we have effects on the layer. And if at any time you don't want the effect, you can just drag it to the trash. That's with my painted glow. I'm going to just put it back to the way she had it. All right. Oops. Okay, what else is here? All right, so this one was done with just the environment, and he added who looks like he doesn't quite belong in this scene. This is an older scene. The bike man, the biker guy. He looks like he's from a different time. Maybe he's a time traveler. And then, so this was this is the environment. Then bike man was added. And how did he get it to look like, get it to be a little more believable? How did he get, see, there's a third layer, one that's on top, that he labeled car. So how do you think he did that? Guys,
selected the car and then made it a new layer and then moved that layer above the motorcycle layer.
Exactly. How did he make it a new layer? What's my favorite keyboard shortcut?
Command or Control J.
Yep, you got it. Exactly. Very good. But there's something that's a little strange about this bike man. I mean, he could be a time traveler. There could be something magical about him that could make it believable. But does anything look a little odd about the way this bike man is placed in this image, or how he's sitting in this image?
The sunlight. The sunlight on him looks like a midday, 12 o'clock sun.
Mm-hmm.
While the sunlight in the rest of the image is like an early morning or late afternoon.
Very perceptive. Yeah, that is a good eye that you have to pick that out, and that's something that he could do by adjusting the colors, perhaps with using image adjustments, and then playing with different color options, like color balance, like I did for color correcting. Anything else? Any other?
There's no shadow.
No shadow. Yeah, that makes it look a little strange, like he's just kind of suspended there in midair, and he's not casting any shadow. He's not ground. He feels like he's not on the ground. And where's the shadow? Because the cars have a shadow, so you would want to create a shadow to make it believable. Did you guys saw last week how I created a shadow, or do you guys want to see a review or another technique on how to create a shadow? I could show it if you guys want.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so in order to create a shadow for this bike map, I would load the marching ants on the layer, the bike man layer itself, by holding down the command key on a Mac, or it would be the control key on Windows, and command or control clicking the layer thumbnail for the bike man layer. So I'm going to command click, and so now that layer has its marching ants loaded. And what I could do is I could make a separate layer. I'm just gonna add a new layer by clicking the plus at the bottom, or I could go to the flyout menu and choose new layer at the top of the layers panel, and I'll call this shadow. Say okay. And then while I'm highlighted on the shadow layer, I want to just dump in some paint bucket So I'm going to take my paint bucket tool here, and I'm also going to take my eyedropper tool, which is up here near under the crop tool, eyedropper, just to find the right color for my shadow. So I can click on a shadow in the image to get a color that I want to fill in my marching ants. And then I take my paint bucket, and because I'm highlighted on this new layer that I named shadow, the paint is going to go to the new layer. It's not going to affect the bike man. Just going to go inside of the bike man's marching ants, but it's going to go onto the shadow layer. So I'm just going to click, and it drops in that color. There might be a place that I have to click again in to fill it out. So it's filled out now. And then now I've got this shape. Can hit Command D to deselect, and I can use my move tool, and I can move this around where I want to move it around. I can put it under the bike man, so I can drag shadow under bike man, and I want to have it lay down. But before I have it lay down, if I wanted to make the edges softened, I could load the marching ants again on this shadow. So on the shadow layer now the shadow layer does have pixels on it. I'm going to command click the thumbnail, and then I'm going to go to select, modify, and feather, and that'll modify how the marching ants are going to affect the edges of the pixels that are within them. I'm going to say okay, and this time I'm going to use my favorite shortcut, Command J, and that makes another layer. So that makes a separate layer that's a feathered layer. So this is shadow. I'm going to call this shadow feathered. So now I have a few shadows to choose from here. So this is the hard edge shadow, and this is the feathered shadow. I think based on the photograph, it looks like the shadow will look better with the feathered edge. So I'm going to just go with the feathered edge shadow and delete the other shadow. So I'll just drag this shadow to the trash and work with this shadow, this feathered shadow. So I'll bring it down here, and then I'm going to go to edit, transform, and I like to start with distort for a shadow, because then I can just drag the top of the bounding box down. Let me just move down a little bit here. And the shadow is very narrow under the cars, so I'm going to try to keep the shadow narrow under the bike man. And I could just kind of distort it. And if I'm happy with that, then I'll just press return. And then to make the shadow look more realistic, you can, while the shadow layer is highlighted, you can go to your blending mode drop down on your layers panel and experiment with some different blending modes that will allow you to see the texture of the ground through the layer. So this top set of options is going to darken your layer, darken, multiply these, color burn. Then this set of options is going to lighten the color. And then there's overlay. Overlay might work. Soft light, hard light. I think hard light works for this, because I can see that line on the road through the shadow. I could also adjust the opacity if I want to on the shadow, but I think I want to keep the richness of it because the shadow under the cars is kind of dark still. And let me just zoom out here. And I could go and soften things up even further with a little bit of eraser here and there, bring down the opacity. Maybe I'll make the size of the eraser. Oops, I don't want to be on the bike man layer when I do that. I want to be on the shadow layer. And then I can make the size of the eraser smaller and just kind of erase a little bit here and there. Maybe I need to bring up the opacity to start with. Oops. Maybe make it just go a little bit along the edge to soften things up a little here and there. Alright, so that's adding the shadow. So without the shadow, he looks kind of strange and suspended, and the shadow kind of grounds him. Alright. Let's see. Okay, what else do I have here? So this is some other imagery that's been created by students for this assignment. And this one is done very simply with just 2 layers. What's great about this is the way the subject is interacting with the environment and the way that changes the meaning of the individual images as they are, when they come together in one. So just looking at the background by itself, just like an explosion in the distance, then we put the subject there interacting, and wow, this guy has superpowers. He throws fireballs. It tells a whole different story. So that's the idea.